His hand was already on my thigh, slow, steady, and heavy like it belonged there. I should have stopped him. I should have said something, anything, but the words refused to come out. My lips were trembling, not because I was scared, but because I was seconds away from doing something I swore I'd never do. His face was so close I could feel his breath on my neck, warm and intoxicating. We were sitting in his car, parked in the back lot of a quiet diner, the kind of place where nobody cared enough to look twice. The windows were fogged, the air thick with everything we had been holding back for months. He leaned in closer, and my heart was pounding like I'd just run a mile. If I moved just an inch, our lips would touch. If I tilted my head, I would cross a line I could never take back. And that's when I have to pause, right here. Before I tell you what happened next, let me say this. If you're watching this video, make sure you like it, share it, and subscribe to the channel, because what I'm about to tell you isn't the kind of thing I could ever say out loud in real life. This is my secret, my anonymous confession, and the only way you'll ever know the whole story is right here. So go ahead, hit that button. Now, let me take you back to the very beginning. When I first met him, I never thought of him that way. Not even for a second. He was just a friend. A safe one. The kind of man you could laugh with over coffee without worrying about him getting the wrong idea. He was my husband's buddy first, which made it even more harmless. He'd come over on weekends, help my husband fix things around the house, or sit with us on the porch drinking beers and talking about football. I'll call him Mark, though that's not his real name. Mark was easy to like. Tall, relaxed, funny without trying too hard. He had that boy-next-door charm, like someone you'd trust to water your plants if you went on vacation. I was married, and he knew it. He had his own life, his own circle, and our connection was never supposed to be anything more than casual. But life has a way of changing things slowly, almost too quietly for you to notice. At first, it was small. My husband would fall asleep on the couch, and Mark and I would stay up, finishing the last glass of wine, talking about music or movies. He always listened. Not just nodded, but really listened, like my words mattered. My husband, God bless him, wasn't the listening type. His answers were always short, distracted. Mark, on the other hand, asked questions, leaned in, made me feel like what I said was worth hearing. One night, after my husband had gone upstairs early, Mark and I sat in the backyard. It was summer, warm enough to sit barefoot in the grass. The sound of crickets filled the silence between our conversations. I remember looking at him across the glow of the citronella candle and thinking, he looks different tonight. Not handsome in the usual way, but softer, closer. I pushed that thought away. I was married. He was my husband's friend. That was the rulebook. Still, I noticed things I shouldn't have. Like how his shirt clung to his shoulders, or the way he laughed when I teased him. I noticed how my body felt lighter around him, like I could breathe easier. It was innocent, at least, that's what I told myself. The turning point came months later. My husband had gone on a short work trip, nothing unusual. Mark dropped by to check on the yard because we had been having problems with the sprinkler system. I didn't expect him to stay long, but he ended up lingering. I made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling through the blinds. I don't even remember what we were talking about, something silly, I think, but then he reached across the table and touched my hand. Just for a second. It was nothing, really. A casual gesture. But my body reacted like it was fire. My chest tightened, my stomach flipped. His fingers brushed mine, and for the rest of that day, I couldn't stop replaying it in my head. That was when I knew the line between us wasn't as solid as I thought. But back then, we didn't cross it. We stayed friends. At least on the outside. Inside, I was fighting something I didn't want to admit. The way my phone buzzed with his messages gave me a thrill I shouldn't have felt. The way his name popped up made me smile when my husband's barely made me blink. Looking back now, I realize how slippery that slope was. One laugh. One look. One innocent touch, and suddenly the world doesn't look the same anymore. And yet, even as I tell you this, I still remember the first night it almost happened, the night in that car, the foggy windows, the way my heart begged me to let go. But that moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was built, brick by brick, out of every smile, every late-night talk, every silent understanding that we were becoming something we were never supposed to be. And that's why I'm here, telling you this story. Because I wasn't caught. My husband never found out. To this day, he doesn't have a clue. I could have buried it, carried the weight of it alone. But part of me wants someone, anyone, to know the truth. We were just friends. Until we weren't. And in the next chapter, I'll tell you how those walls finally broke, piece by piece, until the secret was too heavy to ignore. The weeks after that night in the car felt like walking a tightrope. Every time I thought about him, my heart raced with guilt and excitement all at once. Nothing had happened, technically. We hadn't kissed. We hadn't gone further than we should. But the energy between us had shifted, and once you notice that shift, there's no going back. I told myself it was harmless. That's the lie women like me often cling to. We're just friends. He's safe. I'm married, so nothing will happen. But every time I replayed that moment, his hand on my thigh, his face so close to mine, I knew that friendship wasn't all it was anymore. At home, life went on as usual. My husband left early for work, came home late, sometimes too tired to talk. Dinner, dishes, bed. We moved like two people on autopilot, bound by routine more than passion. We were comfortable, predictable, and for years, I thought that was enough. But with Mark, it wasn't comfortable, it was alive. He started texting me more, at first about casual things. Did your sprinkler finally get fixed? You still drinking that same cheap wine? Simple, innocent words. But late at night, when I was lying in bed next to my sleeping husband, those texts felt like sparks under my skin. And then came the little favors. Hey, you mind if I stop by and grab that charger I left at your place? Or, I'm close to your neighborhood, want some coffee? It was always small, always reasonable, but each visit added another layer to the fire building between us. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when he stopped by unannounced. My husband was still at work, the house was quiet, and I remember standing there with a basket of clothes in my arms, trying not to let him see how nervous I was. He leaned against the doorway, watching me in that casual way men do when they don't want to admit they're staring. You always this domestic? He teased, smirking. Somebody's got to do it, I replied, trying to sound unbothered, but my voice came out softer than I wanted. He stepped inside, picked up one of my husband's shirts from the pile, and tossed it onto the chair. Bet he doesn't even notice when you do all this. I froze. Because he was right. My husband didn't notice. Not the laundry, not the dinners, not the small efforts I poured into our home. But Mark noticed. That was the difference. I brushed off his words with a laugh, but they stuck with me long after he left. That night, lying in bed, I thought about him leaning in the doorway, watching me like I was worth noticing. I thought about how my husband had walked right past the folded clothes without a word. And I hated myself for comparing the two. Over the next few weeks, our friendship grew more dangerous. We'd linger in conversations longer than necessary, share glances that lasted a little too long. I started dressing up just a little more when I knew he might come around. Subtle changes, nothing obvious, but enough to make me feel like I was preparing for him. Not my husband. One evening, we went grocery shopping together. My husband had forgotten a few things, and Mark offered to drive me since he was already heading that way. It was something so ordinary, but I swear the whole store felt like a secret. We walked side by side through the aisles, laughing at silly things, brushing shoulders as we moved past each other. At one point, he reached for a jar on the top shelf and handed it to me. His fingers brushed mine, and for a split second, I wanted to lean in, right there in the middle of that aisle, and kiss him. I didn't, of course. But the thought was there, raw and dangerous. And the more I tried to push it away, the stronger it came back. By now, I was thinking about him every night. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every laugh, every look, every casual touch. My husband lay beside me, breathing heavily in his sleep, completely unaware that his wife was falling asleep with another man's face in her head. I told myself I wouldn't let it go further. That's how we justify it. But inside, I think I already knew I was lying. One Friday night, it all came to a head. My husband had gone out of town for a weekend trip with his brothers, and Mark texted me. "You busy tonight?" I stared at the message for what felt like forever. My heart was thundering in my chest. I typed, erased, typed again. Finally, I answered, "Not really, why?" "Thought we could grab a drink. Just to hang out." It sounded harmless. Just friends, grabbing a drink. But we both knew it wasn't harmless anymore. That night, I stood in front of the mirror longer than I should have, putting on lipstick I hadn't worn in months. My hand shook as I fastened my earrings, like I was preparing for something I couldn't name out loud. When I walked into the bar, he was already there, leaning against the counter, looking every bit like temptation in human form. He smiled when he saw me, and I swear my knees went weak. We sat, we drank, we laughed like we always did. But underneath the laughter, something else was simmering. Something we couldn't ignore forever. At one point, he leaned close, his lips near my ear, and said, "You know we're playing with fire, right?" I turned to him, my face just inches from his, and whispered, "Then why can't I stop?" The look in his eyes told me he couldn't stop either. That night didn't end with a kiss. Not yet. But it ended with a promise neither of us said out loud, that this wasn't going to stay innocent much longer. And as I went home, slipping quietly into bed next to my sleeping husband, I knew my life was about to change forever. The night of that bar outing haunted me for days. I kept replaying it in my head, the way he leaned close, the way my body betrayed me by leaning back into him. We hadn't kissed, but it felt like we had. My lips tingled as if they already knew his taste. At home, I was quieter than usual, moving through the routines of marriage like a ghost. My husband didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. Either way, it made the silence between us feel heavier. Mark, on the other hand, wasn't silent. He texted me the next morning, "Had fun last night. Still thinking about you." I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. He wasn't hiding it anymore. And neither was I. I typed back, "Me too." That was the first confession. Not of love, not of betrayal, but of longing. And once you confess longing, everything else follows. It happened a week later. My husband was working late, one of those endless shifts that kept him away until midnight. Mark knew because I'd told him earlier in the day, casually, without meaning anything by it. Or maybe I did. I can't even tell anymore. Around 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed. "Want some company?" I hesitated, staring at the words. Every logical part of me screamed no. But my thumbs typed yes before my brain caught up. 10 minutes later, he was at my door. I let him in, heart racing, palms sweaty. He looked casual, jeans, a plain shirt, but the way his eyes swept over me made me feel exposed. I wore a simple sundress, nothing fancy, but under his gaze, it felt like silk clinging to my skin. We sat on the couch, pretending to watch TV. The air between us was thick, every laugh too long, every glance too deep. My body was buzzing, like electricity had taken over my veins. At one point, he leaned forward to grab his drink, and his hand brushed my knee. It was nothing. An accident. But neither of us pulled away. His hand lingered, warm, firm, claiming space it shouldn't. My chest rose and fell too quickly, my breath shallow. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and in that silence, I knew. There was no going back. He leaned closer, slow enough to give me a chance to stop him. I didn't. My eyes closed before his lips even touched mine, like my body had been waiting for this moment all along. When his mouth finally met mine, it was soft at first, hesitant, testing. But the second I kissed him back, all the restraint shattered. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me deeper, and I melted into him like I'd been starving and he was the only thing that could feed me. The kiss was fire. Raw, reckless fire. Every ounce of guilt I felt was drowned out by the heat of it. My body pressed against his, desperate, hungry. His fingers dug into my skin like he was afraid I'd vanish if he let go. And then, just as suddenly, we pulled apart. Both of us breathing hard, both of us wide-eyed. "We shouldn't," I whispered, though my lips were already aching for him again. "I know," he said, his voice low and rough. "But I can't stop." Neither could I. We kissed again, harder this time, almost angry at the universe for making this wrong when it felt so right. I lost track of time, lost track of sense. The world outside didn't exist. There was only his mouth, his hands, his body pressed against mine. It was dangerous. Addictive. And I wanted more. But somewhere between the fire and the frenzy, I caught a glimpse of the wedding photo on the wall, the one of me and my husband smiling on the beach, sun setting behind us. Guilt hit me like ice water. I broke the kiss, pushing gently against his chest. My hands were trembling. "We can't. I can't do this." His jaw tightened, his eyes searching mine. For a second, I thought he'd argue, but he didn't. He just nodded slowly, though his hand was still resting on my thigh like he couldn't bring himself to let go. "I know," he said again. But the look in his eyes told me that knowing didn't matter. Not anymore. The rest of the night, we sat there, side by side, saying nothing. The TV played in the background, but I couldn't have told you what show was on. My lips were swollen, my heart still racing, my mind spinning with what we had just done. When he finally left, I walked him to the door. For a moment, we just stood there, staring at each other. He leaned in like he wanted one last kiss, but he stopped himself. His restraint made it worse somehow. "Good night," he whispered. "Good night," I whispered back. And then he was gone. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. My husband came home late, kissed my forehead absently before crawling into bed beside me. His lips were dry, quick, distracted. Nothing like Mark's. I closed my eyes, but all I could feel was the ghost of another man's kiss. I wish I could tell you that was the only time. That the guilt was enough to stop me. But the truth? Once you cross that line, once you taste what's forbidden, you can't pretend it didn't happen. You crave it again. You ache for it. And I did. Every second of every day after that kiss, I wanted more. But before I go further, let me pause here and remind you, if you're still listening to this, don't forget to like this video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Because this story, it only gets more intense from here, and I don't want you to miss what happens next. Now, back to it. That first kiss was the beginning of the end of our friendship. From then on, every look, every text, every casual meeting carried a weight we couldn't ignore. It wasn't just friends anymore. It was desire dressed up as denial. And soon, denial wasn't enough. In the next chapter, I'll tell you how that kiss turned into something more, something we couldn't stop even if we wanted to. After that first kiss, nothing between us was the same. We tried to act normal. We tried to pretend that it had been a mistake, a moment of weakness we could put behind us. But the truth is, pretending was harder than giving in. Every time I saw him, I felt that same pull, that same fire humming under my skin. His eyes would linger on me a second too long, and my breath would catch. A brush of his hand would send sparks racing through me. We didn't need to say it out loud, we both knew we were already in too deep. It started small. More texts. More coincidental visits. More excuses to be alone. Each time, we promised ourselves we'd keep it under control. Each time, the promise broke. The second kiss came only days after the first. Then a third. And by the time a week had passed, kissing wasn't enough anymore. The night it finally happened, it was raining hard. One of those heavy, American summer storms that makes the streets glisten under the streetlights. My husband had gone out of town again, another work trip that left me alone in the house. Mark knew, of course. He showed up at my door soaked from the rain, his shirt clinging to his chest, water dripping down his face. He laughed, running his hand through his wet hair, and something about the sight of him like that, unpolished, raw, made my heart pound. "You're drenched," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "Guess I needed an excuse to see you," he teased, but his voice was lower, heavier. I handed him a towel, but before he even took it, his eyes locked on mine, and I knew. There would be no pretending tonight. The towel slipped to the floor as his hands gripped my waist, pulling me to him. His lips crushed against mine, fierce and desperate, and I kissed him back with everything I'd been holding inside. We stumbled through the house, knocking into furniture, too caught up in the fire to care. My back hit the wall, his mouth trailing down my neck, and all I could think was how alive I felt. For the first time in years, maybe longer, I felt wanted. Desired. Seen. We didn't stop this time. We didn't pull away. We crossed the line we swore we never would, and once we did, there was no going back. I won't lie, it was reckless. It was messy. But it was real. The heat, the hunger, the way his hands explored me like I was something precious. Every touch burned away the years of neglect I'd felt in my marriage. Every kiss erased the loneliness I'd been carrying in silence. That night, in the dim light of my living room, with the storm raging outside, Mark and I became something we could never undo. Afterward, we sat together on the couch, my head resting on his chest, both of us too dazed to speak. The guilt came creeping in, heavy and sharp, but it couldn't compete with the rush of what we had just done. "I shouldn't have," I started, my voice trembling. "Don't," he interrupted, pressing his lips to my hair. "Don't ruin it with regret." But regret was already there. Tangled with desire. Because even as I lay in his arms, I thought of my husband, faithful, trusting, asleep somewhere in a hotel bed with no idea what his wife was doing. And yet, I didn't stop. From that night on, it became a pattern. We found excuses. Little windows of time where we could sneak away. Lunch breaks. Afternoons when my husband worked late. Occasional weekends when I said I was running errands. Sometimes it was my house. Sometimes it was his. And sometimes, when the risk felt too high, it was a cheap hotel off the highway, the kind with flickering neon lights and rooms that smelled faintly of cigarettes. We told ourselves each time would be the last. But each time only made us crave the next. He'd text me things that made my heart race in the middle of the day. "Thinking about you right now. Can't wait to taste you again. Last night. God, I can't stop replaying it." I'd delete the messages quickly, terrified my husband would see them. But deleting them didn't erase the way they made me feel. And the lies started to pile up. "I'm going shopping. I'm meeting a friend. I'm staying late at work." I became good at lying. Too good. And the scariest part? My husband never suspected a thing. But with every secret meeting, every stolen kiss, the danger grew heavier. One night, we were in my car, parked behind a grocery store, and I swore I saw someone I knew walk past. My heart nearly exploded from my chest. If they had looked closer, if they had recognized me, it would have all been over. Another time, we were at that same diner where we used to laugh so innocently, and my phone buzzed. It was my husband, asking where I was. My hand shook as I typed out a lie, Mark watching me with a guilty smile. We were careful. But no matter how careful we were, the fear of being caught was always there, lurking in the shadows of every touch. And still, the risk made it more thrilling. That's the sick truth about affairs. The danger doesn't stop you. It tempts you. It makes every moment sharper, every kiss hotter, every secret sweeter. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if my husband had been more attentive, more loving, more present. Would I still have fallen into Mark's arms? Or was it always bound to happen, no matter what? Because the truth is, it wasn't just about being neglected. It was about being wanted. Mark wanted me in a way my husband hadn't in years. And once I tasted that feeling again, I couldn't let it go. But I also couldn't escape the guilt. I'd look at my husband across the dinner table, smiling at me, trusting me, and I'd feel sick. But then my phone would buzz with a message from Mark, and the sickness would turn into hunger. It was a vicious cycle, and I was trapped in it. One night, after we'd spent hours tangled up together, Mark whispered against my skin, "We can't keep doing this." "I know," I whispered back. But neither of us stopped. And we both knew we wouldn't. By now, I was living two lives, the loyal wife on one side, and the secret lover on the other. Balancing them was exhausting, but also intoxicating. Every day felt like walking a tightrope between disaster and desire. And yet, my husband never caught on. Not once. That's why I can tell this story now, anonymously, without fear of being exposed. Because nobody knows. Nobody but me, and now you. But the closer we got, the harder it became to keep the lines clear. And soon, things reached a point where even I couldn't deny what was happening. In the final chapter, I'll tell you how it all came full circle, and why this secret is something I'll carry for the rest of my life. We ended up back in that car again. The same car, the same quiet parking lot behind the diner, the same fog on the windows. That's where this whole story started, and in many ways, that's where it ended too. His hand was on my thigh again, his lips brushing so close to mine that I could taste the warmth of his breath. Everything inside me screamed yes, begged me to let go, to give in to the pull that had consumed us for months. But my heart was pounding so loud, I thought it might break me. I pulled back just a little, my chest rising and falling too quickly. "Mark," I whispered, "we can't keep doing this." He closed his eyes, leaning his head back against the seat. "I know," he said, his voice rough. "But I don't know how to stop." And the truth? Neither did I. We kissed anyway, like addicts who swear each hit is the last. Our mouths collided, desperate, hungry, filled with all the things we couldn't say out loud. His hand slid under my dress, and I let him, even though my brain was screaming that this was wrong. That was the last time we were together like that. The last night our friendship crossed into something else. Because the truth was, it wasn't just desire anymore. It was danger. Every time we touched, every time we lied, we got closer to being caught. And deep down, I think both of us knew it was only a matter of time before we destroyed everything. So we stopped. Not because we wanted to, but because we had to. After that night, things between us grew distant. The texts became shorter, the visits less frequent. We were both pulling away, not because the fire had burned out, but because it burned too hot. If we kept feeding it, it would consume us. It wasn't easy. I'd lie awake at night, aching for the sound of his voice, the feel of his touch. Sometimes I'd pick up my phone, my fingers hovering over his name, wanting to reach out. But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I poured myself back into my marriage. I smiled at my husband, cooked his favorite meals, even tried harder in bed. But in the back of my mind, I knew I wasn't doing it for him. I was doing it to hide my guilt, to bury the truth under layers of normalcy. Because he never found out. Not once. To this day, he has no idea what I did. No idea that the woman he trusts, the woman he sleeps next to every night, once belonged to another man in ways she swore she never would. And that's why I can tell you this now. Anonymously. Safely. I'm not proud of what I did. But I can't say I regret it either. The truth is, Mark gave me something my husband hadn't in years: attention. Passion. The feeling of being wanted, not just needed. He reminded me I was still alive, still capable of desire, still a woman, not just a wife. And while our affair ended, the memory of it never did. It lives inside me, in the quiet moments when I'm alone, in the secret part of my heart my husband will never touch. Sometimes, when I look in the mirror, I see her, the woman who broke her vows, who kissed another man, who lived a double life. And I wonder if she's really gone, or if she's just hiding, waiting for another spark to wake her up again. Maybe that's the scariest part of all. I'll never tell my husband. Not because I don't love him, because I do, in my own way. But because telling him would destroy him and destroy us. And I don't want to lose the life we've built together. So I carry this secret alone. When people look at me, they see a faithful wife, a good woman, someone who has it all together. They don't see the nights in the car, the afternoons in the hotel rooms, the way my body shook under another man's touch. They don't see the fire I buried, the hunger I fed in secret. But you see it. Because I chose to tell you. That's why I sit here, behind a screen, my face hidden, my name unspoken, sharing this story with strangers on the internet. Because if I don't tell someone, the weight of it will eat me alive. We were just friends. That's what everyone believes. That's what my husband still thinks. But the truth is darker, heavier, more complicated. We were just friends, until that happened. And before I end this, let me pause here and say this. If you've listened all the way to the end, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone you trust, and subscribe to the channel. I'll be sharing more stories, more confessions, more secrets that people like me can't say out loud in real life. Because sometimes, the only way to survive a secret, is to let it out where nobody knows your name. So, thank you for listening to mine. This was my story. My confession. My truth. And it's one I'll carry with me for the rest of my life.